You just have to do it and not be scared. A lot of people have great ideas, but they're afraid to act upon them. And you just have to remember, like, no one really cares if you succeed or fail, truly. And every failure is a learning experience, so it's still a win. I think that a lot of people will respect you if you try and you actually learn something, even if it doesn't succeed. So just do it would be one of my biggest takeaways. And then, I don't know, YOLO.
All right, Carol. So I was really trying to figure out how I'm going to introduce you on the pod. I think there's a very professional way of introducing you, and there's a very unprofessional way of introducing you. I think the professional way is that Carol is a serial entrepreneur with 6 businesses globally. She's featured on CNBC, Forbes, Vogue. She's been on Netflix. She's partnered with Rolls-Royce. She's won Singapore Designer of the Year. She has launched her own collection at Paris Fashion Week. She's been a great friend and a very supportive friend, and she's now a wonderful mother. And then the unprofessional way is she is the biggest party animal I've ever met in my entire life. And for the past 8 years, we were partying non-stop in Singapore when you were still living there. But you've also, always had a very large network and a very network that always supports you with everything that you do. And you've always been able to maintain that very, very well. And it's great to see you bring those two worlds together. And I think that really sums you up, Carol, is that you've always been a very genuine person. Some people are different in different circumstances, in different situations, but you've always been the same, Carol. Everyone knows that you go hard partying, but you also go very hard at business. And you always bring those two together, which is where we would have nights out and you'll still be networking, throwing your business cards everywhere, going through that same time. So there's a hell of a lot that I've learned from you over the years. You were one of my only friends in Singapore that actually was an entrepreneur and had a business. Everybody else lived a very corporate life. Even in our friendship group, everyone was very corporate. But you had a very different life. You were always coming home extremely late, carrying boxes, getting your showroom done, then doing the marketing, then on the sewing machine, then doing your hirings. You were just consistently, 100% full steam ahead, which was so different to seeing my friends in the corporate world where, we'd finish work, go for some beers, go for dinner and come home. But not to mention, as much as you'd then come home tired, you'd still be joining us on the weekends and having a great time, right? So I've learned how to take risks, how to work hard, how to party hard, and how to utilize networks. And I feel that they're great things for other people to also learn from that want to take steps forward to build their own business. And I learned a hell of a lot from you from starting my own business as well. So let's get to that and let's hear more about you and how this all kicked off.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited. It's great to see you. And yeah, those were good times we had.
Yeah, we were residents at Bang Bang, I think.
Our little sail family.
No, that's it. So, Carol, like, I want to try and understand, why are you so special? Like, how did this all kick off? What happened in your childhood to make you to make you be like this?
I mean, I don't think I'm that special. I just think I have a lot of energy and I am just an ordinary girl trying to do extraordinary things. And it really stems from my parents. I constantly attribute everything to them because, they were pretty much like poor Taiwanese immigrants, came to the US when early 20s, had me the first year they moved, and they literally built themselves up from nothing, having multiple businesses. And I got to witness all of that growing up, all the ups and downs, all the late nights, from successful businesses to failed businesses to everything in between. And then, watching my parents work really hard, but then also, become successful, become community leaders in Dallas, being able to provide a lot of jobs to people, being able to help a lot of families, doing a lot of philanthropy. And that just really inspired me to want to be an entrepreneur as well, because that's kind of what I grew up watching. And I just could see the impact that they were able to make as business owners, and then the freedom that they had being their own boss. Like we would be able to take trips whenever we wanted. My dad would always pick up my phone call, even if he was in a meeting, because he's the boss. And I just wanted that kind of flexibility and autonomy as well.
Awesome. And then what triggered you to then start your own business? Because surely seeing the ups and downs, you're like, I don't know if I want to do what my parents are doing. But what encouraged you to go forward?
I don't know if I really had a choice because I'm kind of unhireable. No, nobody would hire me. I'm so bossy. And I'm just, I'm such a rebel. I like to do things my way, and it's really hard for me to like follow somebody else's path. So I've always just forged my own. And, I studied psychology and economics in school, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that whatever I did, I needed to understand people and I needed to understand money. So that's what I did.
Yeah.
But, a lot of my friends had jobs lined up when they graduated. I didn't because I still didn't know what I wanted to do. I got accepted to a business program at Stanford. It was a summer program. I was sitting there, Stanford MBA professors, and I was all cool, but I was also kind of bored in my classes, and I always wanted to be a fashion designer as a little girl. So once that program ended, I actually enrolled in fashion school and went back to school to get my design degree. And I remember the first time I learned how to sew on an industrial sewing machine, I literally cried because it was so scary and hard. And I was like, okay, that's it. I'm never going to be a fashion designer because this shit is too hard. It's like, it's not happening. And I got really discouraged. But 2 years later, I graduated, top of my class, and I was a fashion designer.
Amazing. And then what? How many years later were you then launching your collection in Paris Fashion Week?
Oh gosh, I guess it's almost 20 years to bring it full circle because, it's not easy being a creative. Even though I knew that was kind of my passion, you just, it never happens overnight, actually. Like, I think that's one big message I want to give entrepreneurs. Like, nothing happens overnight. Sometimes it does take decades. But you just have to trust the process, right? And I actually got my first job in the industry because I moved from San Francisco, where I went to school, down to LA because I was engaged at the time. My fiance was living, working in LA, and he like called off the wedding. So I moved to LA to try to save our relationship. And I just literally just took, the first job paying $12 an hour as like a receptionist at like this, fashion company that only had like three people. They didn't even have a designer. And then all of a sudden I got the opportunity to become the designer as my first job in this company. And in my second season as the only designer, I was in over 300 stores that were selling my line. And it was super exciting because I didn't know what I was doing. I had obviously had internships, but I didn't major in product development, so I never knew how to communicate with factories in China and all that. I was literally having to Google everything I was doing, and it was wild. But it was such an exciting experience because I would go to trade shows and see my designs get picked up by all these stores, seeing them in department stores, and it was really a crazy ride. So that was my first kind of foray into design and fashion. But then, the economy wasn't doing well at the time, so that company eventually went bankrupt. And then it just so happened that a family friend in Dallas knew I was producing in China, and she called me up and she was like, "Hey, can you help me? Or do you know how to produce cheerleading uniforms in China?" And I was like, "Well, yeah. How hard could that be, right?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, I can do it." And she was like, "Okay, that's great because, up until this point, cheerleading uniforms have only been produced domestically in the US, and no one has really like managed to successfully offshore the production." So I was signed up for the challenge. I was on a flight to Dongguan, which I didn't even know where Dongguan, China was. But I'm always up for an adventure, as you know. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to this place called Dongguan. And, I land in Hong Kong and I was like, oh, wow, like this is going to be awesome because it's Hong Kong. And we kept driving to Shenzhen, and Shenzhen's really cool. And then we keep driving north into like, the Guangdong province, and it's like darkness and like dirt roads and chickens and no street lights. And I'm literally like in a third tier factory town that is like so wild. And I pull up to this like, prison compound looking factory in China. And I was like, oh my God, this is like going to be where I'm going to live while I try to like build out our supply chain. And it was so crazy. It was literally like a movie because, there's thousands of factory workers. The bell rings at 8 o'clock to go to work. And I'm literally living in a Chinese factory. And I thought I'd only be there for 6 months, but it just so happened that we weren't able to find the right suppliers. It wasn't efficient because it was actually a very complicated process. So I said the only way to do it is to really bring everything in-house and build our own factory. And I stayed in China for 2.5 years in Dongguan, building and running a factory because of that. And that was like definitely one of the wildest experiences of my life.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So, what was that experience like? Because I remember you telling me stories like there were times where you were even sleeping in the factory because there was just so much going on, right?
Oh, definitely. So, like, I mean, I lived in the factory dorms, like sleeping under a mosquito net. So I was like on campus, right? And then we had another factory that was a little bit down the road. I would ride my bike, and Dongguan's not safe, so people thought I was crazy for doing that, but I did it anyway. But yeah, they work like 24/7. It's crazy. They get like one day off a month. They work around the clock. I'm obviously working with US time at night as well. So it was hard. I was basically crying every week. I'm not gonna lie. But I mean, we were also crushing it. In our first year, we were already doing multi-million dollars in revenue, and it was very exciting, but it was a lot of sacrifice, being away from friends and family, uh, having one American friend that happened to be there, and otherwise just speaking Mandarin the whole time. So it was crazy. And that business, like, my partner is a phenomenal entrepreneur, and my co-founder, she went on to expand that business. It's very successful today. But I actually ended up exiting because I met a guy in Hong Kong,
Ah,
and
it's always the
he,
guys, Carol. It's always the guys
I
making the move
know,
around.
I know, I'm a sucker, because I always feel like it's easier to make money than to fall in love. So like, if I have the opportunity, I'm gonna go with my heart because yeah, like who knows if that's gonna happen again. So yeah, we dated. He would visit me in Dongguan. I would go down to Hong Kong, and then finally he got an opportunity in Singapore. He's like, do you want to come to Singapore with me, or do you want to live in a factory dorm for the rest of your life?" And I said, I guess I'm gonna go. So, I exited that company for love, moved to Hong Kong with him. And one of his dreams is to build an MMA brand. And so when I was in Hong Kong with him, I helped him and his partners build out this MMA brand. It was like one of the first Chinese inspired MMA brands in China. So that was really cool. We dressed top fighters, and, we were doing something pretty unique at the time. And obviously MMA was a really fast growing sport. And we ended up going to Taiwan after that. But then we broke up. Well, so then after we broke up, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to keep running this business when we're not together. I did try for a little bit, but it didn't work. So, left that company. And, once I had a taste of Singapore, I remember like staying at Marina Bay Sands. I'm like, oh my God, this place is like the future, right? It's like just I've never seen any place like it. It's so modern. It's so amazing. I was like, I want to live here. But everybody, like you said, like most people in Singapore work in corporate. So, I'm an American, I need a working visa to be in Singapore. So I was like, okay, forget startup life. Let me just get a normal job for once. And I applied to Google, to Facebook, to Uber, to like all the, you know, tech corporate companies that I could find, and nobody would hire me. It was really funny because I ended up speaking at Google years later, and I said, I'm on the stage because you guys wouldn't hire me. But
I love it.
yeah, so, full circle moment as well. But so I was applying, nothing was happening, and I was like, okay, if no company is going to give me a visa, I'm going to give myself a visa. I'm going to hire myself. But of course, I need a business. And when I was back for the holidays, my mom was actually she actually asked me, "What are you going to do with all these pageant gowns sitting in your closet?" Because I used to do beauty pageants, and I had almost 100 evening gowns just like sitting in my closet collecting dust. And I was like, well, I could sell them. But I had been trying to sell them and they weren't moving. So I was like, I'm going to bring them to Singapore and I'm going to rent them out because there is nobody doing designer dress rental in Singapore. But I know Rent the Runway in the US is crushing it. And there was nobody doing that. So I brought all my dresses to Singapore and I started a dress rental company with my own closet. And to make sure there was demand, I actually soft launched by throwing a party because I love to party.
Yep.
And it was happened to be my birthday. So I said, okay, I'm going to throw a big birthday party. It's black tie. Everybody has to come in tuxedos and gowns. And if you don't have one, you can rent them from my new business, Covetella. And that's kind of how Covetella started.
You essentially created your market there, then, right? You create a use case for people to actually need to use you, which is fantastic. I think another point just to add there as well is I remember going to your apartment back in those days, and there was just dresses everywhere. Like the living room, the bedroom would just be full of dresses. There'll be rails in the kitchen of just clothes and models just walking in and out all the time because sometimes be doing your shoots in there, which was always great to be a part of that. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I think it's really important to mention that because you went through a hell of a lot because you didn't have a showroom at the time. The showroom at the time was your apartment.
Yep. Yeah. It was my apartment and I had two flatmates and luckily, two guys and luckily they were cool with me having hundreds of dresses in the living room for a little while. And I did a pop-up shop, and to get dresses, and I was, I'm new to Singapore. I didn't know anybody when I was going there. And I just had to make it happen. So I literally went door to door, knocking on like every designer's door and just popping and be like, hey, like, I'm Carol. I noticed that you had some beautiful dresses. Like, would you be open to renting them out?
Yeah.
And it's crazy because like one of my good friends, she has a bridal company and she always recalls the moment where I walked through the door and she was like, "Who is this bold girl just prancing into my showroom thinking she could rent out my dresses?" But, she said yes. A lot of designers said yes. And that's really how I was able to like leverage other people's inventory in order to build up my business in the beginning because I needed as many dresses as possible. And I actually did my hard launch at the Singapore Yacht Show. And I think it was like $10,000 to sponsor the fashion show. And I was like, okay, I don't have $10,000 to sponsor this fashion show. But what I did was I offered to help them sell tables for the gala. And like,
Okay.
yeah, so that's how we kind of like did this like barter where it's like, okay, if I sell tables and I help you with the gala, then you give me the sponsorship for the show. And it worked out. I had like amazing content because I was able to position my new brand with the Singapore Yacht Show, which is like ultra luxury right off the bat. And it was amazing.
Carol, let's talk about like marketing, right? Because I think you do tremendously well with that, and not only marketing your business, but marketing yourself as well. So from knocking on the doors at all of these different, with all these different designers, getting your inventory, how do you then get yourself out there? How do you even get connected with, the yacht club in Singapore? How does that happen?
I mean, like you said earlier, I love to socialize. I love to party. I mean, nobody knew me in Singapore, so I had to just go out and meet people. And, the best way to meet people is through partying, in my opinion. And I literally back then went out probably 3, 4 nights a week, just hustling, business cards, just introducing myself to people. I remember I was invited to some Tatler party, I think, and then we were riding the golf cart, and I didn't know who was sitting next to me, but I started chatting her up, just telling her about my business, and we get there, and she was like the managing director. And and then a few months later, they feature me in the magazine,
Oh, perfect.
which is crazy, right? And I was like, oh my God, like Tatler is, it's like one of the most prestigious magazines in Singapore. So I was like freaking out because they profiled me as like, a style icon, which is super flattering. And then, Olivier from L'Officiel, I also met through partying, and he's the managing director of L'Officiel, and he's been super supportive throughout my whole time in Singapore, sponsoring coverage for all of my anniversary parties and events. But not just media. Well, actually, the Forbes article also came through like, a friend that I met just out and as well as CNBC. So I think you're right. Like a lot of my opportunities did come from like the network I was able to build, but I didn't ever build them with the intention of like, oh, is this person useful? I just think, you know, I love people. I love having fun. Sometimes I don't even know what half my friends do, to be honest. And then, and but once you're friends with people, you want to help out people that you like, And I always make sure that there's like a win-win. So I feel like I'm really good at partnerships because I always find out win-win solutions. So even with like, Podium Lounge, Formula One, I was able to do the fashion show because I was also able to bring a lot of value. I actually won this marketing award against Under Armour and the Malaysian government.
Great.
It was a marketing magazine. I won Best Pop-Up of the Year, which is insane because I was against all these big companies. I was an underdog. But it was because I leveraged the space in the Ritz-Carlton. I had met the general manager and I asked him, oh, like for Formula One, like what are you doing with this big lobby space? And he's like, oh, we're not sure yet. I was like, well, why don't I create a pop-up store? you know, and I'll bring like all these cool designers and like services. So I brought in like free makeovers, hairstylists, free shoe shines, free massages. Like it was a whole dress up Cinderella experience sponsored by Covetella, held at the Ritz-Carlton, lounge where all the drivers stayed during Formula One. And I literally spent maybe $1,000 on this activation because I brought so many different brands together that wanted to be associated with Formula One. And then I was able to bring a lot of traffic to the Ritz-Carlton during that weekend as well. So that was like a huge highlight in my journey
Again,
for
Carol,
sure.
you like made your market again, right? You made your opportunity, and then utilize your network to then fulfill it, right?
Yeah.
So what happened with Covetella? Where did that business go?
Right. So we had had a really good 5-year run. We were voted Singapore's top dress rental destination. We were featured on Netflix, Singapore Social, and our dresses were actually featured in the movie Crazy Rich Asians, which was super exciting. So we had a really good run, but then COVID happened. COVID happened. Obviously, events just died and pretty dramatically, right? I remember January, everybody was canceling their rental dresses for all the galas. And I was just like panicking, like, what am I going to do? And a lot of people didn't take it seriously, but like I just lost like my last quarter's revenue in like a month. Um, and so a week before we were going into lockdown, I decided I was going to cut up my dresses and make face masks. And everyone thought I was crazy because at the time, face masks weren't mandatory. And I decided to wear a surgical mask because I was like, okay, if this is really a thing, I should wear them. But my friends, like, I would go to places, they wouldn't even let me like wear them because they're like, oh, don't wear that. They're like, why are you wearing a face mask? Like, you look scary. And I was like so annoyed. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make a face mask that doesn't make me look scary, but makes me look fashionable. So I go to my showroom, I like cut up a like red sequin dress and I sew it together quickly. I put on my face and I'm like, this is what I'm gonna do during the pandemic. And so while the last weekend, I don't know if you remember, we had like a week notice, and everybody was like hanging out with their friends for the last time before we went to lockdown. I was like scrambling, sewing machine, fabric, all the things, like just like building a little factory in my bedroom, just like preparing to hunker down while everybody else is like, trying to hang out with their friends for the last time. I was like, I got to get all the supplies I can before all the stores shut. And then we went into lockdown, and I spent that whole time just building my website, making my masks, doing like selfie photos for my product shots. And I launched 10 days into lockdown. And 2 months, lockdown was like 2 months. Once we got out, another 2 months, we were already doing six figures in face masks. And I shipped to 20 different countries. It was such a fast growing business. It was wild. I had already like I didn't even have time to be sad about Covetella because I was kind of sad. I had to shut down the whole stores, all my beautiful dresses, but everything happened so fast with Maskela. And within 6 months, like we were doing like $10,000 a day, and I was like, wow, this is Covetella on like its best day ever. So, and like e-commerce is just another level, right? So it was really exciting. But oh yeah, and then we got to make masks for like Bulgari, Microsoft, Rolls-Royce. We were sold in Neiman Marcus, Lady Gaga, Jessica Alba, Sarah Jessica
Yeah.
Parker. They were like wearing our masks, which is crazy because like back to the showroom moment where I put on the mask, I was like, I'm gonna make masks that Lady Gaga wants to wear. And 2 years later, she was wearing my mask on the set of House of Gucci, and I literally cried because I was like, this is insane. Like it really happened. So that was a good run.
Was that also your network again that got you these connections to these celebrities to use your product, or how did you get to these people?
Not those because I had during the pandemic, I spent a year in Singapore, and then for the second half, when Singapore was shut down, I was like, okay, I can't live like this. So I moved back to the US. And, I had not lived in the US for 10 years. So even though I had friends in New York, SF, LA, Dallas, like all the places I lived, it wasn't like a strong, fresh network with like that I could count on. So I actually hired a PR firm for that.
Okay, brilliant, brilliant. And Carol, just want to go back to what you were saying about how fast this business was, right? I remember during COVID, you made like on the group chat, you were like, guys, I need you to come over right now because I need to take pictures with you guys wearing this, right? And there's like, I couldn't go because I was stuck busy doing work. And I was like, John, make sure that are you at home because Carol needs to take pictures. And there was all of our friends were doing their marketing, right? Or on your website and stuff,
Yeah.
which I thought was so it was literally hit the ground running. Website done, pictures done, marketing done, Instagram done, let's go. And you saw the gap in the market with what was going on and the trend at the time, and just generally what the economy was like and the lockdown situation, and just took advantage of it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not one to just sit around. I think I would have gone crazy if I wasn't doing something during lockdown.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, even when you've broken your legs, you're always doing stuff, right? Or you hurt your knee.
Yeah,
You're
that's
even
right. Uh,
performing with your crutches in a club. It's
I totally forgot about that. That's so, yeah, you're right. Oh my God.
no, that was super funny. So what happened with Maskela? Where did that business go then? Because COVID obviously stopped. So did the business stop when COVID stopped, or what
Yeah,
happened?
basically. I mean, it's still, I mean, the site's still up. There's still random orders of face masks here and there, but most people don't wear a face mask anymore. So it's kind of dead. Um, but then during uh, my last year in Singapore, I decided to join a design competition that was sponsored by the Singapore government. It was also because we were in lockdown, and I wasn't sure how like crazy Maskela was going to grow, and this was kind of my plan B in case it doesn't take off. So I actually joined the competition at the same time I was building Maskela, which is really crazy and masochistic. But and a lot of people, everyone in Singapore knew me as like an entrepreneur businesswoman, but nobody knew me as a designer because I had not designed in 10 years. I don't think anyone knew I could sew because I was just promoting and marketing other designers. So I definitely was the underdog in the competition up against these very established designers in Singapore. So it was pretty crazy that I won. And the prize was that I got a sponsored show at Paris Fashion Week, which was literally my, the dream of dreams as a fashion designer. It's like the opportunity to climb Mount Everest, right? And it was so exciting. It did get postponed a year because of the pandemic, and then I was able to show in 2022. But 8 weeks before my show, I find out I'm pregnant.
Oh yeah, of course.
So there's another wrench because I was ready to like, be this huge designer and, show at Paris and then launch my like couture gowns and do this whole thing, be like the next Vera Wang. But once I find out I was pregnant, oh my God, it was so hard trying to finish my collection in the first trimester because I kept falling asleep. You're so tired in your first trimester. I was like sewing and just like nodding off at the same time. I didn't even know how I was going to finish my collection. I I finished my finale dress like 2 hours before the show. It was insane.
That's typical. You're always doing stuff like that though. It always comes together last minute, but it comes together so well. You always put it out of the bag.
I know. I love that adrenaline and that pressure. Yeah, so then I show and I was very proud of my collection. I worked my butt off. And then I just really wanted to enjoy, making a baby instead of a business. And I moved to Vegas with my fiance and my husband, and then I just chilled. I just spent the year just like hanging out, being pregnant. Um, I did come back to Singapore to do a fashion show, but yeah, I was really ready to be a mom because I had turned 40 that year. And I was scared I would never get to be a mom, quite frankly. And, I feel so blessed that I was able to have a baby naturally. And I wanted to make sure that, everything went well. So I didn't want to be super stressed running around. So I kind of took it easy that year. But 6 months,
I think it's a break well deserved as well, Carol, because you've been going hard for such a long time and you've always wanted to settle down and have a family. And I'm so happy that's actually worked out because I know you even went through a process of freezing the eggs also, but again, didn't even need to use those bad boys. You still do it naturally. So
yeah.
that's great.
Exactly. So I mean, it was very special. I had a beautiful baby boy. He's very healthy, growing so fast. But 6 months, I stopped breastfeeding and I was ready to like find my next adventure. Luckily, I have a husband that's very hands-on with childcare. He's more than an equal partner. Like baby loves him, and he's just the best dad ever. And he was always been very supportive of me being an entrepreneur. So he's like, yeah, go for it. And I, went to Miami Fashion Week because I was like, okay, let me like maybe I'll do a resort wear line. But I really wasn't sure. I knew I didn't want to do couture because I just don't think there's that market, even though that's my passion, is like beautiful couture gowns. Like no one's buying $10,000 dresses anymore. They're buying, $50 dresses on Amazon, right? Or like $50 dresses on Shein, right? So it's like the fashion industry has really evolved, and I wasn't really sure what I could bring to the table that was different. And so I was kind of in this exploration phase. And I remember being at Miami Fashion Week, watching a fashion show, and you know, the year I got pregnant, I also started getting tinnitus, which is ringing in my ear, which is actually incurable. And the music was so loud, everybody was like sitting there covering their ears like this. And I was like, man, I really wish I had earplugs right now because I know this is like damaging my ears, and my ears are already damaged. I don't want to make them worse. And I was like, oh, I wish I had earplugs, but earplugs are so ugly. And I was like, I wish I had earplugs that look like earrings. And I was like, oh man, that's a really good idea. I wonder if anyone's doing it. I immediately Googled while I was at the show, like, fancy earplugs or like, pretty earplugs and nothing came up. Like literally there was nothing that was like nice and glamorous. And then I had my next big idea, and that's how Jing was born.
Awesome. And now what's the journey with Jing? How's that going so far?
So we basically just launched. I did a Kickstarter just to kind of test demand, make sure I wasn't crazy, see what people thought, got feedback. I did apply for a design patent, which is really exciting. The idea of being like an inventor. So yeah, it's available now. But I don't want to just do earplugs. I finally realized that my calling right now, because I'm a mother now, I'm in my 40s, I really wanted to actually build a wellness company. Uh, But and I was always like a big wellness junkie, right? I always do those like health retreats in Thailand by myself, like 4 times a year, to offset all the partying that we did. I would detox and then we would retox together, and then I just kind of go back and forth. So I mean, you asked me about balance. That's pretty much how I balanced my life. So yeah, I've always been really interested in the wellness industry. But again, I didn't know where the white space that was, like what's the angle. And with Jing, it just came to me. I'm like, I'm going to build a fashion wellness company and make self-care products that are beautiful and can provide self-expression and not just self-care. And that's really the essence of what Jing Essentials is about, is just helping you look good and feel good.
So are there what's in the pipeline? Any products in the pipeline that you're designing at the moment?
Yes, absolutely. So the next thing, obviously going with earplugs, is eye masks. So we're going to have very beautiful eye masks coming out. And then I travel a lot, so I think about what's in my kit is also a hand sanitizer. So we have like hand sanitizers coming out that are also going to be beautiful, and it's going to be like a whole travel like wellness kit that you can like gift friends, and then kind of follow that line of uh, wellness products.
Yeah. Awesome. And how did the name Jing come around?
So my husband actually thought of that. It was, the name is always the hardest part sometimes. But once you have it, your business really feels real, right? It's like when you give your baby a name, then it becomes real. And Jing actually means essence in Chinese. And for me, like it also means tranquility and quiet. So for earplugs, it was perfect. And so the name is really trying to give peace, tranquility, um, to our users.
So, Carol, I want to ask you about some of the highs and lows. I've obviously known you for a number of years, and I definitely, as amazing as this journey sounds that you've just explained to us, I know there's definitely been some low moments in there. When I rocked up to your apartment on a Sunday and we're both hungover and we were both like, "What the fuck are we doing with our lives? What is happening?" So, I definitely, there's been some low moments there. So, let's talk about the highs and the lows. So what are some of the lows that you've experienced within those 8 years, and how have you got yourself through those?
Ironically, some of the biggest lows in my personal life led to some of the biggest highs in my professional life, right? So as I talked about, I kind of like chased different men around the globe and then landed wherever I did and just tried to land on my feet and build something wherever I was ended up, right? But of course, those were all really hard moments for me personally because, I value love, relationships, family a lot. And, all of those people were very meaningful to me. So it was always hard when those chapters ended. And I think that I kind of overcompensated by throwing my energy and attention into my professional life and my work because that's the only way I could get out of bed sometimes, right? I remember in LA, like, I think I cried every day for a year when my relationship ended. And I would just drive to work crying, and then I get to work, put on my face, leave work, cry, and then just do it all again. But at least like for those hours I was working, I wasn't crying. And then, eventually time heals all. So I was able to just pull myself out of it. But, it helped give me a reason and a purpose to keep going. So that I think that's why I'm such a workaholic sometimes, because I feel real purpose in what I'm doing, and I've always been in fashion because I really love to make women feel beautiful. Because my story is like of the ugly duckling, as a little Asian girl with like Coke bottle glasses and braces, growing up in Texas with all these like beautiful white girls. um, I felt really ugly and shy, and the only way I could really express myself and get that confidence was actually through my clothes, and that's kind of how I ended up in fashion. So yeah, those are definitely big lows. Uh, Professionally, I mean, the end of every business was hard because you pour your heart into something. And whether it lasted 2 years, whether it lasted 6 years, it's never easy to, you know, have it end. But I think what was great was that most of the time something else popped up pretty quickly afterwards. And that Steve Jobs quote where they say like you can only connect the dots like looking backwards. I really feel that's true because I in my life, I just kind of went with the flow. I didn't know I was going to live in 10 cities across five, six countries in my lifetime as an adult, right? In the last 20 years. And I just kind of rolled with it. And now it just kind of like looking back, it all makes sense because each each company, each relationship, each experience, all the friends I made, like all kind of like came together to bring me where I am now. And, I'm just happy that, I have a baby because that was kind of the one thing I was always nervous about. And I know that's a lot of pressure for female entrepreneurs, especially trying to balance that.
No, beautiful. And let's talk about that, like with female entrepreneurs as well. Like that must be an interesting journey. I'm sure there's definitely been some hurdles there as well. What have you experienced being a female entrepreneur that's been difficult, and how have you got through that?
So I think I got lucky because even though, at the beginning of Covetella, I was actually fundraising and all the investors are men, right? Especially in Asia. And I have my stories of like, investors like hitting on me and whatever, but, nothing crazy or shady happened. But I always did kind of use that to my advantage to get through the door. And unapologetic about it because, okay, if an investor wants to talk to me because I'm a pretty girl, like I'm going to use that opportunity to talk to him and pitch my business. And you just have to, I can't sit there wishing I was as a guy instead, right? I have to use my strengths. And but it is hard sometimes being, a woman in a room full of men. But that's also what, makes you special sometimes. I think when I became a mother, that really changed a lot of things. Like this business I'm building now is so much harder. Even though like maybe logistically it's not as hard, it's so much harder to build just because I have to balance my time with my family, with my baby. Like my sole priority is not work anymore. It was actually like, when I was working in the factory, it was really easy because I didn't have to worry about what to eat because the cafeteria, I didn't have to worry about what to wear because uniform, like it's just like work, 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 and like everything was taken care of. I just focused on work. Here, it's like, I'm a mom. I actually have to worry about what is my baby gonna eat. I have to make sure I get back home in time for bedtime so I can spend time with him. And they grow so fast. And so I get really torn um, with splitting my time now and wanting to like go to the office or work from home. And that's kind of been a struggle, to be honest.
Carol, what's like top three tips then? So if there's a mother out there that wants to start a business, what's the top three tips that you'd give them?
Well, for mothers especially, I say, and they always say this to moms, but I really believe it's true. It's give yourself grace. And that's with everything in parenting, being a new mom. You want to have everything perfect, but it can never be perfect. And you just have to really learn to forgive yourself, give yourself grace. Hey, I didn't get that much done today. That's okay. Hey, I wasn't able to cook the healthiest meal for my baby and he had to eat something else. Like, that's okay, right? So, because that's going to wear on you, right? And I'm a perfectionist too, but there's no way you can do it all at the same time. And so giving yourself grace is really important to keep you sane. For all entrepreneurs out there, I would just say go for it. As you can tell, like my story, like things just kind of like I just kind of rolled with it. And once I had an idea, I acted on it as fast as I could. I didn't think about 20 years down the line or like, is this person going to wear this or like, what am I going to do like in 6 months? Like is this mask going to work? Let's just put it on the market, take some photos, let's do it, right? Is this dress rental going to work? Let me throw a party, have people rent dresses. And you just have to do it and not be scared. I think a lot of people have great ideas, but they're afraid to act upon them. And you just have to remember, like, no one really cares if you succeed or fail, truly, right? And every failure is a learning experience, so it's still a win. And I think that a lot of people will respect you if you try and you actually learn something, even if it doesn't succeed. So just do it would be one of my biggest takeaways. And then, I don't know, YOLO. That's kind of like my motto, as you know. You do only live once. You can't make work your entire life. You have to enjoy the journey. You have to have fun. You have to see your friends. You have to like, take vacations for yourself. You have to prioritize dating. You have to just, you know, try to be as balanced as you can, even though you're building something meaningful, because you don't want to wake up when you're like, 60 years old and you don't have any friends and you have a lot of money, right? So that's not happiness, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
even though right now I'm kind of starting from scratch with Jing, you know, Forbes and Rolls Royce are not knocking on my door right now, but I love my life. I love coming home to my baby and playing with him and having a quieter lifestyle right now while I'm building this business from scratch, getting one order a day right now because one day it's not going to be like that. And you just have to make sure you stay present, you really enjoy every moment, and you just remember that it's never going to stay the same. It's always going to change, right? And enjoy the journey.
No, awesome, Carol. I want to just go deeper into that, right? And these might sound like very stupid questions, but like to not be scared, to keep going hard, to, you know, drive forward constantly, what skills and attributes does someone need to have, or should someone really consider building to do those types of things? Like for me, for example, it was incredibly scary for me to start the business and get out there. But luckily I had a great support network around me, and I just grounded myself as much as I could, and gave myself as much confidence as I could to just go and do it. So what skills and attributes do you have, or do you think others should consider building to move forward?
So I think a lot of people would describe me as fearless, but that's there's actually no such thing. Like everyone's scared of something. I think what I've been able to do is train myself to be scared and do it anyway. And I think that's what real courage is, right? Is I'm scared as hell, but I'm still going to take action. And that is definitely a skill that you can build by just continuing to do those things and just admit, like, hey, wow, this is really scary for me, but let's just do it. Fuck it, right? One big example is that, as I grew up, I was very shy. I couldn't even raise my hand in class to ask a question. And whenever I was called on, I would be like shaking. I really was so shy. I hated speaking in public. And it was so nerve-wracking. But what I did to overcome that was that I put myself in beauty pageants because that was so scary for me to be on stage answering questions on the fly, being in a bikini, like being scrutinized 360, like was the scariest thing I could imagine. And I said, let's do it. I'm going to put myself in it. And my first pageant, I was very scared. I ended up top five, and I remember doing the onstage question. I was so nervous. I was shaking. But then I did another pageant, and I did another pageant, and I did another pageant, and I ended up winning a national pageant. I was, the first Asian to win Miss San Francisco, and I just kept training myself. And then once I became a beauty queen, I had to do all these public speaking events, and I sucked in the beginning, but I had to do them. And like with practice makes perfect, and you just and now I love it. Right now I can like stand on a stage in front of Google employees and just shoot the shit. And that definitely did not come natural, right? I mean, even today I'm so out of practice. I was pretty nervous doing this podcast because
Come on, man.
I had not done it. I tell you, like I don't think I've done a podcast in like 2, 3 years. The last one was like Bank of Singapore, and actually, like I turned down a bunch of podcasts last year because I was so I was like in my transition, right? I had a baby. I was in postpartum. I had a little bit of postpartum depression. I had moved back to Dallas in this like smaller city. It wasn't Singapore. Didn't have many friends here, and I was just really out of my element. And when people asked me to be on a podcast, I was like I just didn't feel like myself. So I actually said no. Um, and so like, part of me getting my mojo back in a sense is just like putting myself back out there. And I think that's what you really have to do as an entrepreneur is just like keep putting yourself out there until it's not scary anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Even for me with this pod, right? I was like, oh, I'll do it, in 3 years' time once my business has become successful, or like I'll do it at this point in my life. And I just thought to myself, you know what, fuck it, just do it now. Otherwise, you genuinely do not know what's going to happen over I don't know what's going to happen in the next hour, right? So you kind of just got to get on with it and do it. Carol, just another quick question for you, right? Uh, For you to do all of these things, how do you train yourself to do it? Do you read books? Do you go on courses? Like, how do you do this?
I Google everything I need to know. And now I chat GPT everything. I kid you not, like when people are like, oh, like how should I do this? Like my first answer is like Google it. Like see what answers come up, right? Research, read as much as you can, right? Um, Learn from other. There's so much free resource out there, right? I even technical things. I watch YouTube videos to figure out how to code this part of my website, right? And pretty much everything I do, I've like basically had to learn on the fly through just asking friends like on the internet. And we're so lucky to live in this era where like you can literally just figure anything out by going online. And that's what you have to do. You just see how to do it, you try it. If it doesn't work, you try another technique. If that doesn't work, you try another, and then sooner or later something's going to work.
Well, it's going to click, right? No, definitely. But I know you're an avid reader as well. So, what's like the top three books that you've read?
Oh man. So I this is not a business book, but I love The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I feel
Didn't you
like
meet him as well?
yes, I did. That was wild. I got to meet him through our 1880 trip. Yeah, that was really cool. Um, we were so hungover when we met him too. Oh my God. We stayed out till like 4 o'clock drinking the night before. Oh, and we were like almost falling asleep the whole time we were with him. It was so bad.
Love that.
Um, but yeah, I just feel like, it gives you a lot of perspective, that book. Um, Seven Habits is always like a good classic, just because your life is literally made out of habits and your habits kind of defined your actions. And I don't know, I kind of want to say like a recent one. Um, I don't know, get back to me.
Uh, no, all good, all good. So, Carol, I've got a lot of my friends are all egg freezing at the time, pumping themselves up with hormones and telling me all these crazy stories. I know that you've been through this journey. So, could you just give us some insight on that? And for those women out there that do want to do egg freezing, any tips for them as well?
Yeah, so I did it when I was 35, which is basically like the cutoff of when you should do it. And I mean, I never in a million years thought I would be like single at 35. And then I think when that year came, I was like, oh my God, I haven't had a boyfriend in like years. And like I basically stayed single most of the time I was in Singapore. I was like, I should probably think about future planning and plan B. And, I kind of like rushed back home to Texas to freeze my eggs without, you know, I did some research obviously, but I was like, oh man, I need to do this. Like I'm 35. Um, and I think, as you know, because I was so frustrated that there was a lack of personal information about it, because there's articles and things, but there wasn't at the time a lot of like personal accounts of like what to expect. And so I documented like every single moment of my life, going through egg freezing, going to the doctor's appointments, doing my shots, like crying and like, disappointed, like how many follicles I had. And I only got like 4 eggs. But I think I'm glad that that was helpful for a lot of people. And I do think that people should consider it if they do want a family one day, but I wouldn't put too much pressure. I think stress is the biggest barrier to getting pregnant and having a baby. I think a lot of people are just really stressed, and that's why they might not be able to get pregnant. And so I would say whichever path you choose, just remember to take time for yourself always. Um, have some techniques on how to like de-stress yourself, whether it's to meditate, exercise, go on a walk with friends, like you partying, anything, right? You need something to keep you sane and to like uh, keep you centered. And I think if you're going through that process or even just trying to have kids, you need to be mindful of that.
And Carol, I like to wrap up the pod with allowing you to just give your story and your message to the world. As I mentioned, I want this to be a platform for talented individuals and ambitious entrepreneurs and anybody that we can learn from to help each other out to give their message from their experiences. So yeah, hit us up with what you'd like to tell people to help them get through their journeys.
Whew. Wow, I feel like I'm saying like a presidential speech or something. You know, I think I kind of said it before. Just don't be scared. YOLO, just go for it. That's literally my best advice is we have such a short time on this earth that life is too short not to be doing something that you love and you're waking up excited to go to work every day or to like live your life. And it could be anything, right? Um, and I just think that you just have to do it. You got to understand that one day you're going to be dead and that you need to go chase your dreams today, not tomorrow, not next month, not next year, not in 5 years, but like today. Obviously, don't like, rack up credit card debt and leave your family and like all that kind of crazy things. But, put things in motion and just take like tiny, tiny steps, right? Just by even like researching, putting down your ideas, researching them, putting them in an idea journal, start building a mood board about like what you want your product or service to look like, build like a mini prototype, right? I mean, when I built Jing, it was literally, I bought like 20 different earplugs on Amazon. And I was like, how can I make this better? How can I make it more glamorous and like bling, like Carol, right? And, I bought all these different crystals and I was like gluing them myself and like figuring out like what looks good and just testing, right? Just trying and you never know. It could be a flop, but then I'll think of something else. And you just have to really believe in yourself that you can do it. Like none of us know what we're doing at the end of the day. A lot of us are just like, fake it till you make it, or just like Googling as we go. And that's okay. And that's really how entrepreneurship is like. It's jumping off the cliff and then building the parachute on the way down and having the time of your life doing it.
Awesome, man. That was fantastic. Honestly, this pod has like fired me up to go and do some work now as well. I know that this could have definitely gone on for another couple of hours,
Oh.
but I know you need to get back to baby Alex, and I should probably do some work now as well. I just want to say thank you so much for coming onto the pod, Carol. It's been great having you on here. So many great takeaways, and like I said, it's fired me up now as well. So thanks for taking out your time for this.
Of course. Thanks for having me. It's great to see you.